What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved tough guys sits down for what should be a lighthearted chat and everything goes sideways? Today, we're breaking down the moment Jason Momoa walked off Kelly Clarkson's set. And trust me, you need to hear exactly what was said before he stormed out. But first, make sure you're subscribed and drop a comment below telling us whose side you're on in this whole situation. So picture this. Jason Momoa walks onto the Kelly Clarkson show set looking exactly how you'd expect him to look. Relaxed, confident, wearing one of those perfectly worn-in tank tops that somehow only he can pull off. The audience is going crazy. Kelly's got that trademark smile plastered on her face, and everything seems like it's going to be another fun celebrity interview. They do the usual opening banter. Kelly compliments his latest project. Jason thanks the crowd, and then they both settle into their chairs. Kelly starts off simple enough. She's talking about his career, his dedication to his craft, all the standard stuff. Jason's nodding along, giving those charismatic answers everyone loves him for. He's talking about his training regimen, about how he prepares for these massive physical roles, and Kelly's eating it up. The audience is loving every second of it. Then Kelly leans forward a bit, and her tone shifts just slightly. Most people probably didn't even catch it at first. But you can see Jason's expression change just a fraction. Kelly says, "So Jason, you've built this incredible career playing these larger-than-life characters, these warriors and heroes, but I'm curious," and she pauses here for effect. How much of that is really you versus how much is just good acting and maybe some really fantastic stunt coordination? The audience laughs because Kelly delivers it with that playful tone she's known for, but there's something underneath it. Jason laughs too, but it's one of those laughs that doesn't quite reach his eyes. He says, "Well, Kelly, I do my own stunts whenever they'll let me. I train constantly. And I think anyone who's worked with me would tell you I bring a lot of myself to these roles." Kelly nods, but she doesn't let it go. She comes back with, "Oh, absolutely. I'm not questioning your commitment. I'm just saying that Hollywood has a way of building these personas, right? Like we see you as this tough guy, this warrior, but at the end of the day, you're an actor playing a part. There's a difference between being a character and being that person in real life." Jason shifts in his seat a little. He's still smiling, but you can see his jaw tighten just slightly. He says, "Sure, there's always a line between character and reality, but I don't just play these roles, Kelly. I live a lifestyle that supports them. I'm not showing up to set out of shape and letting Hollywood magic do all the work." Kelly laughs again and says, "Of course not. You look amazing. Everyone can see that. But come on." With the personal trainers and the nutritionists and the entire team of people making sure you look perfect for every shot, it's not exactly the same as if you were just, a regular guy doing this stuff on your own. The audience goes quiet for a second because this is starting to feel less like playful banter and more like Kelly's actually challenging him. Jason's smile gets a little tighter. He says, "I appreciate the compliment about how I look, but I've been an athlete my whole life. I grew up climbing, surfing, doing things that actually required real strength and skill. This isn't just movie magic. This is decades of dedication." Kelly tilts her head and says, "I hear you. I do. But let's be honest. There's a big difference between being athletic and being the kind of warrior character you play on screen. Those guys are fighting for their lives, facing real danger. You're on a controlled set with safety measures everywhere. I'm just wondering if sometimes the line between fantasy and reality gets a little blurred for you." Now Jason's not smiling anymore. He sits back in his chair and crosses his arms. He says, "Kelly, are you actually questioning whether I understand the difference between a movie and real life?" Kelly puts her hands up in that defensive gesture and says, No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that sometimes actors can get really deep into these roles and maybe start believing their own hype a little bit. It happens to everyone in this industry." Jason's voice drops a little lower. He says, "I don't believe my own hype, Kelly. I believe in the work I put in. There's a difference. I've never claimed to be an actual warrior or fighter, but I've also never disrespected the preparation that goes into these roles by pretending. It's all smoke and mirrors." Kelly seems to sense she's touched a nerve, but instead of backing off, she keeps going. She says, "Okay, but let's talk about that preparation. You mentioned training and dedication, but you've also got access to resources that most people could never dream of. I mean, when you're getting paid millions of dollars to get in shape for a role, doesn't that make it a little easier than, say, someone who's working a regular job and trying to stay fit? Jason leans forward now. He says, "Are you seriously trying to diminish what I do because I get paid for it? Should I apologize for making a living doing what I love? Should I pretend that the physical and mental work I put in doesn't count because I'm fortunate enough to do it professionally?" Kelly shakes her head quickly. She says, "That's not what I'm saying at all, Jason. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation about privilege in Hollywood. You've been given opportunities that a lot of people haven't had, and I think it's important to acknowledge that." Jason's expression hardens. He says, "I've never denied my privilege, Kelly. I'm grateful every single day for the opportunities I've had. But privilege doesn't erase hard work. I've earned everything I have through dedication and commitment. And I'm not going to sit here and let you imply that my success is just because I got lucky or because Hollywood decided to build me up." The tension in the room is thick now. You can see audience members glancing at each other, unsure if this is still part of the show or if something real is happening. Kelly tries to lighten the mood. She says, Okay, let's take a step back here. I didn't mean to upset you. I was just trying to have a deeper conversation than the usual fluff piece interview." Jason doesn't soften. He says, "There's a difference between deeper conversation and passive-aggressive questioning. Kelly, if you wanted to have a real discussion about privilege in Hollywood, we could have done that. But instead, you're sitting here questioning my authenticity, my work ethic, and whether I understand the difference between movies and reality. That's not depth, that's disrespect." Kelly's smile falters completely now. She says, "I really wasn't trying to disrespect you, Jason. I think maybe you're taking this a little too personally." And that's when Jason's face really changes. He says, taking it personally, "Kelly, you've spent the last 10 minutes basically calling me a fake who doesn't understand his own life. How exactly should I be taking that?" Kelly tries to respond, but Jason keeps going. He says, "You know what I think is happening here? I think you wanted to create a moment. You wanted to push buttons and get a reaction, because that makes for good television. Well, congratulations, you got your reaction. But don't sit there and act surprised when someone pushes back against being insulted on your show." Kelly's face flushes. She says, "That is not what I was trying to do. I was attempting to have a genuine conversation about the reality of fame and success in Hollywood. If that made you uncomfortable, I'm sorry, but these are conversations worth having." Jason stands up now. Not quickly, not dramatically, but deliberately. He says, "These are absolutely conversations worth having, Kelly, but they should be had with respect and honesty, not with backhanded comments disguised as curiosity. I came here thinking we were going to have a good time, talk about my work, maybe make people laugh. Instead, I got ambushed with questions designed to make me look like I'm out of touch or living in a fantasy world." Kelly stands up too. She says, "Jason, please sit down. I think we're having a miscommunication here. Let's just reset and start over." Jason shakes his head. He says, "No, I don't think we need to reset. I think I need to go." Kelly's face goes from flushed to almost pale. She says, "Jason, come on. We've got more to talk about. Don't leave like this." The audience is completely silent now. Every single person watching this unfold with their phones probably already out recording every second. Jason turns to face Kelly fully, and you can see he's made up his mind. But he's not done talking yet. He says, "What else is there to talk about, Kelly? You want to question what else about my life? Maybe you want to ask if my kids are really mine or if Hollywood CGI'd them too. Maybe you want to know if my relationships are real or just publicity stunts. Where exactly did you want this conversation to go?" Kelly puts her hand on her chest like she's been physically struck. She says, "That is completely unfair. I asked legitimate questions about your career, and somehow you've twisted this into me attacking your entire life. All I did was point out that there's a difference between playing a hero and being one, and you've completely overreacted." Jason laughs, but there's no humor in it. He says, "There it is. Now, I'm overreacting." Classic move, Kelly. Push someone until they respond, and then act like they're the problem for having feelings about it. You know what? Let me ask you something. When you won American Idol all those years ago, did people question whether you really earned it or if it was just the producers building a narrative? Did people constantly ask you if you understood the difference between being a singer and being a television personality? Kelly's mouth opens, but nothing comes out for a second. Then she says, "That's completely different, and you know it." Jason raises his eyebrows. He says, "Is it? Because it seems to me like you built a career on talent and hard work, just like I did. But for some reason, you think it's appropriate to sit here and dissect whether my career is legitimate. Why is that, Kelly? What makes your journey more valid than mine?" Kelly's defensive now. She says, "I never said my journey was more valid. I'm asking questions that I think viewers at home are curious about. Not everyone gets to be a movie star, Jason. Not everyone gets the opportunities you've had. I think it's reasonable to examine what that means." Jason nods slowly. He says, "Okay, so let's examine it. Let's talk about opportunities. You think I just fell into this career? You think someone just handed me roles because I looked a certain way? I auditioned for years, Kelly, years. I got rejected more times than I can count. I worked jobs I hated to pay my bills while I tried to make this dream happen. And when I finally got my break, I worked harder than almost anyone else to make sure I deserved to keep it." Kelly interrupts. She says, "And I'm sure you did work hard. But you have to admit that being 6'4" and looking like you do opened doors that wouldn't have opened for other people." Jason's voice gets quieter, which somehow makes it more intense. He says, "So now we're talking about how I look. Is that what this is really about? You want to reduce everything I've accomplished to genetics and luck." Kelly shakes her head quickly. She says, "That's not what I'm saying. Physical appearance matters in Hollywood. That's just a fact. I'm not trying to reduce your accomplishments. I'm trying to provide context." Jason steps closer to the chairs, but doesn't sit down. He says, "Context? That's an interesting word for what you're doing. Because from where I'm standing, you're not providing context. You're trying to undermine everything I've achieved, and I'm trying to figure out why. Did I do something to offend you before I came on this show? Did someone tell you I was difficult to work with? What made you decide that today was the day to take me apart on national television?" Kelly looks genuinely flustered now. She says, "Jason, you're being paranoid. This isn't some conspiracy against you. I ask tough questions of all my guests. That's what makes this show different from other talk shows." We go deeper. Jason shakes his head. He says, "No, Kelly, there's a difference between tough questions and hostile questions. Tough questions would be asking me about the challenges I faced in my career, about how I overcame obstacles, about what drives me. Hostile questions are the ones you've been asking, the ones that start with the assumption that I'm somehow fake or undeserving. Kelly's producer is probably losing their mind at this point, because you can see someone off camera making gestures, trying to get them to wrap this up or cut to commercial. But Kelly ignores it. She says, "If you can't handle being challenged, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. This is part of being a public figure, Jason. People are going to ask questions you don't like." Jason's jaw clenches. He says, "I can handle being challenged, Kelly. What I can't handle is being disrespected under the guise of journalism. You want to challenge me? Fine. Ask me about my failures. Ask me about roles I didn't get. Ask me about times I fell short, but don't sit there and pretend that my successes aren't real, that my work doesn't matter, that everything I've built is just Hollywood illusion." Kelly crosses her arms. She says, "I never said your work doesn't matter. You're putting words in my mouth and creating an argument that doesn't exist." Jason points at her, not aggressively, but definitely emphatic. He says, "You said," and I quote, "how much of that is really you versus how much is just good acting and maybe some really fantastic stunt coordination. You questioned whether I understand the difference between character and reality. You implied that my fitness is just the result of having money and resources. Every single one of those statements is designed to minimize what I do. So don't tell me I'm creating an argument that doesn't exist when I'm literally responding to words that came out of your mouth." Kelly's face is red now. She says, "I was trying to have a nuanced conversation about celebrity culture, and you've turned it into a personal attack. I think you need to examine why you're so defensive about these topics." And that's when Jason actually laughs out loud. He says, "You think I'm the one who needs to examine something? Kelly, you invited me onto your show. I came here in good faith, ready to promote my work and have a good time with you and your audience. And instead of treating me like a guest, you've treated me like a subject in some kind of social experiment. You've poked and prodded, trying to get me to crack. And now that I'm calling you out on it, suddenly I'm the one with the problem." Kelly's voice rises slightly. She says, "You know what, Jason? maybe you are the problem. Maybe the fact that you can't handle a few questions without getting this worked up says something about you, not about me." The audience gasps. Like audibly gasps. Because Kelly just went from defending her interview style to straight up attacking Jason personally. Jason's face doesn't change, but you can see something shift in his eyes. He says very calmly, "What does it say about me, Kelly? Go ahead, tell me. Tell me, and everyone watching, what you really think." Kelly seems to realize. She's crossed a line, but she's in too deep to back out now. She says, "I think maybe success has made you a little too sensitive. I think maybe you're used to everyone telling you how great you are, and when someone doesn't do that, you can't handle it." Jason nods slowly, like he's processing something. He says, "Interesting theory. Let me offer you another one. I think you wanted to create a viral moment. I think you saw an opportunity to be the talk show host who wasn't afraid to push back against a celebrity, and you thought I'd be an easy target because I'm usually pretty easygoing. But you miscalculated, Kelly. You mistook kindness for weakness, and now you're scrambling because this didn't go the way you planned." Kelly looks like she wants to argue, but Jason keeps talking. He says, "And you know what the really sad part is? We could have had a great conversation. We could have talked about real stuff, meaningful stuff, in a way that was respectful and enlightening. But instead, you chose this. You chose to be combative and condescending. And now we're both standing here looking bad in front of millions of people." Kelly's voice gets defensive again. She says, "I don't think I look bad. I think I look like someone who's willing to ask the questions that other hosts are too scared to ask." Jason picks up his microphone pack from his waistband and starts unhooking it. He says, "You keep telling yourself that, Kelly. You keep believing that what you did here was brave or important. But when you watch this back, and I know you will, I want you to ask yourself one question. Did this make anything better? Did this conversation enlighten anyone or teach anyone anything valuable? Or did it just create drama for the sake of drama?" Kelly watches Jason unhook his microphone, and you can see panic starting to set in because this is really happening. He's really about to walk off her set. She says, "Jason, please, let's just take a breath here. We can turn this around. We can have the conversation you wanted to have. Just sit back down, and let's start fresh." Jason stops unhooking the mic for a second and looks at her. He says, "Why would I do that, Kelly? So you can get another 10 minutes of content out of me. So you can try to spin this into some kind of reconciliation moment for your show. I'm not interested in being part of whatever narrative you're trying to build here." Kelly's desperation is showing now. She says, "It's not about the show, Jason. It's about not leaving things like this. We're both professionals. We can work through this disagreement like adults." Jason finishes removing his mic pack and hands it to someone off camera. He says, "We are working through it like adults." "Kelly, I'm making an adult decision to remove myself from a situation that isn't serving anyone. That's what adults do. They recognize when something isn't working and they make a change." Kelly takes a step toward him. She says, "But walking off sends a message. It makes you look like you can't handle criticism. It makes you look weak." Jason stops and turns back to face her fully. His voice is calm, but there's steel in it. He says, "No, Kelly, staying would make me look weak. Staying would mean I'm willing to tolerate disrespect for the sake of publicity. Staying would mean I value your platform more than I value my own dignity. And I've worked too hard and come too far to sit here and let someone tear me down for entertainment." Kelly's face shows a mix of emotions. Anger, embarrassment, maybe even a little bit of respect. She says, "So that's it? You're just going to leave without giving me a chance to make this right?" Jason shakes his head slowly. He says, "You had your chance to make this right, Kelly. You had multiple chances. Every time I tried to explain how your questions were landing, every time I tried to redirect the conversation to something more constructive, you doubled down. You kept pushing and questioning and insinuating. So no, I'm not going to give you another chance because I don't think you actually want to make this right. I think you want to make it work for you, and those are two very different things." Kelly's voice gets a sharp edge to it. She says, "You know what, Jason? Maybe I was right. Maybe you do live in a bubble where everyone treats you like royalty and you've forgotten what real conversation looks like. Real conversation involves disagreement. It involves being challenged. Not everyone is going to worship at the altar of Jason. M-O-M-O-A. Jason smiles, but it's sad, not angry. He says, "Kelly, I never asked you to worship me. I never asked for special treatment. I asked for basic respect. The same respect you'd show to any other guest who came on your show. But apparently, that was too much to ask. And you're right, real conversation does involve disagreement. But it also involves listening, understanding, and mutual respect. You want to disagree with me? Fine, but do it honestly. Don't hide behind the excuse of being a tough interviewer, when what you're really doing is being unnecessarily antagonistic. Kelly's hands are shaking slightly now. She says, I have been honest. I've been more honest than most hosts would be. I've asked the questions that other people are thinking, but are too polite to say out loud. Jason tilts his head. He says, and that's where you're wrong. You think you're saying what everyone's thinking, but you're really just projecting your own biases and assumptions. Not everyone questions whether actors deserve their success. Not everyone assumes that physical appearance is the only reason someone made it in Hollywood. Not everyone believes that having resources automatically invalidates hard work. Those are your hang-ups, Kelly, not universal truths. Kelly looks like she's been slapped. She says, my hang-ups. You don't know anything about me or what I believe. Jason's voice gets softer, but somehow more cutting. He says, you're right. I don't know you. But I know what you've shown me today. And what you've shown me is someone who's more interested in tearing people down than building them up. Someone who uses their platform to make guests uncomfortable rather than to celebrate them. And maybe that works for you. Maybe that's the brand you're going for. But it's not something I want to be part of. Kelly's eyes are getting glassy now. Whether from anger or tears, it's hard to tell. She says, you think you're so much better than me, don't you? You think because you play heroes on screen, that makes you some kind of moral authority. Jason sighs deeply. He says, no, Kelly, I don't think I'm better than you. I think I'm different from you. I think we have different values about how to treat people. And that's okay. We don't have to agree. But we also don't have to work together. So I'm making the choice to leave. And you can spin that however you want for your audience. Kelly wipes at her eyes quickly. She says, my audience deserves to see how you really are. They deserve to know that the person they idolize can't even handle a simple interview without throwing a tantrum. Jason's expression hardens again. He says, a tantrum. That's what you're calling this. Kelly, I have been calm and articulate this entire time. I have explained my position clearly and repeatedly. Just because I'm not rolling over and accepting your treatment doesn't mean I'm throwing a tantrum. And the fact that you're characterizing it that way tells me everything. I need to know about how you view this situation. Kelly crosses her arms defensively. She says, fine. You want to leave? Then leave. But don't expect me to make you look good when this airs. Don't expect me to edit this to protect your image. Jason actually smiles genuinely for the first time in minutes. He says, Kelly, I don't want you to protect my image. I want you to show exactly what happened here. Show every question you asked and every answer I gave. Show the whole conversation from start to finish. Because I'm not afraid of people seeing this. I said what I meant, and I meant what I said. Can you say the same? Kelly doesn't respond. The silence stretches out for what feels like forever. Finally, Jason says, that's what I thought. You want to air this as some kind of gotcha moment? Some proof that I'm difficult or temperamental? But when people actually watch this conversation, when they hear the questions you asked and the tone you used, they're going to see exactly what happened here, and you know it. Kelly's voice is barely above a whisper now. She says, get off my set. Jason nods once. He says gladly, and then he turns to the audience, the same audience that has been watching this entire exchange in stunned silence. He says, thank you all for being here today. I'm sorry you had to witness this instead of having a fun show to watch. You all deserve better than this. Some people in the audience actually applaud, which clearly wasn't what Kelly expected. Her face goes through about 5 different expressions in rapid succession. She says to the audience, please don't applaud someone walking out on a commitment. That's not behavior we should be encouraging. Jason stops at the edge of the stage. He says without turning around, I'm not walking out on a commitment, Kelly. I'm walking away from abuse. There's a difference. And he keeps walking. Kelly stands there for a moment, clearly unsure what to do next. Her producers are probably screaming in her earpiece, telling her to cut to commercial, to say something, to do anything. Finally, she turns to the camera and says, well, I guess that's the show for today, folks. Sometimes conversations don't go the way you plan them, but that's the reality of live television. But the camera is still rolling as Jason walks past the crew, past the producers, straight toward the exit. You can see crew members looking at each other, unsure whether to stop him or let him go. Nobody stops him. And just before he reaches the door, he pauses, looks back one more time at Kelly standing alone on that stage. And you can see him shake his head slightly. Not in anger, but in something closer to disappointment. Then he pushes through the door, and he's gone. The audience sits in complete silence. Kelly tries to recover, tries to say something about how important difficult conversations are, about how sometimes interviews get heated, but you can tell her heart isn't in it. The damage is done. Whatever she was trying to accomplish with this interview, it clearly didn't work out the way she planned. And now there's footage of Jason Momoa walking off her set that's going to be everywhere within the hour. But here's the thing that makes this whole situation even more complex. Neither of them was completely wrong. Kelly wasn't wrong that celebrities exist in a different world with different resources and opportunities. Jason wasn't wrong that hard work matters regardless of privilege. The problem wasn't the topic of conversation. It was how they talked about it. It was the lack of respect, the assumptions, the willingness to keep pushing even when it was clear the conversation had gone toxic. So whose side are you on? Was Kelly right to ask tough questions even if they made her guest uncomfortable? Or was Jason right to walk away when he felt disrespected? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure you're subscribed, because this conversation is far from over. What do you think Kelly should have done differently to keep Jason from walking out?